Hello and welcome to Mind Control 101. My name is Evan Benton and this is Dogg for Mayor. So when most people think of mind control, I think that the picture of like a zombie comes to mind, someone with no willpower, someone who is totally under the control of another individual through the use of drugs or exotic technology, such as we've seen in movies like The Manchurian Candidate or The Winter Soldier. And while that type of thing definitely exists, that's going to be the subject of some higher level classes. And the focus of this course is just going to be to look at the basic techniques of mind control, the basic process. And in doing so, I hope to underscore the fact that it's a much more commonplace experience than we tend to understand. A couple sources for this course. First of all, this book, How the Illuminati Create an Undetectable Total Mind-Controlled Slave, is not the actual title, okay? This book is a bootleg copy of the original, which has a slightly different title and was written by Fritz Springmeier. So this is a bootleg book. Have you ever seen one? This is the only one I've ever seen, and I found it on a friend's bookshelf. He said, that's a terrible book. Or I said, I saw it, and I said, oh, I really want to read that. I've always wanted to read that. He said, oh, it's a terrible book. You can just have it. So I said, okay, great, thanks. And it says on the title page here, Cisco Wheeler and Fritz Springmeier, just like the real book. But if you type in the ISBN, which is here, you type in that number on Google, and it's going to direct you to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and the author listed there is going to be Illuminati Formula, right? So it's a bootleg copy, and what they did here is it just has terrible formatting, and it's missing some pictures. I think the text is all here because I compared it with some PDFs. You can find this book online, and they basically have produced a terribly formatted, hard to read. I mean, the text just goes across the page like that. Hard to read version of the original, which is designed to discredit Mr. Springmeier. And so if you want to get this book, I suggest going to his website, which is at pentracks.com, and it's a little bit pricey to order directly from him, but I think that's the only place you can actually find it. And so this book actually talks about the MK Ultra and multiple personality disorder, where we're full on turning people into the aforementioned slaves. And we're not going to get to that today, but that's where I'm drawing a lot of this stuff from, and I highly encourage you to pick up a copy of this book or check out some of his videos online. He's got quite a few. Another source whose books I have not read, but I've watched several of his YouTube videos, is Dr. Colin Ross, who is a psychiatrist, and he's one of the only psychiatrists active today who is having the courage to address and treat patients with multiple personality disorder. So he's another, more on the well-respected side of things. Guy to listen to. And interesting there too, multiple personality disorder, which comes out of the dissociative process that we're talking about here, comes out of mind control and is the basis for more advanced techniques, was renamed dissociative identity disorder in 1994. So how fitting is that? Multiple personality disorder was renamed, right? And the name is the identity, and it was given a new identity or a cover identity in 1994. Just fascinating and fitting. So again, the purpose of this course is to demonstrate that mind control is much more commonplace, everyday kind of an experience than we are usually taught. Okay, so a definition of mind control to start with is, I'm just going to say, anything that alters a person's ability to think is mind control. And that has some good information, but it's not really good enough. Think about like the judo flip, for example. if someone comes at me and he's like 300 pounds and I have the ability to just flip him and turn him over my shoulder, that's great. But that's not control per se, because I'm not really able to direct him into a specific location. Right? I can get him out of my direct threat zone, but I can't say throw him specifically into a wall of spikes or something like that. So that's, it's a defensive move, but it's not offensive yet. Okay, so we're gonna go to part 2 definition, or a revision of my original definition, and say mind control is the process of altering a person's ability to think and then reducing his available choices. So we are making someone think that these choices, that the fewer choices that we have, that we're presenting him with, are the only viable choices. And that's mind control in a nutshell, basically. And we immediately think of advertising, right? You don't want to learn how to sew. That's drudgery. So just come to our store and buy one of our dresses. Or you don't want to fix that thing you already have, because the new stuff is so much better. So just come to our store and buy a new version. And so then the process, and this is the meat of the discussion here. How do we do that? How do we control a person's mind? And it's really not that difficult. It's a 2-step process. Okay, the first step is trauma, and trauma leads to step 2, dissociation. So what is dissociation? That's kind of a big word. Well, it's the opposite of association to start, right? So association is to connect 2 types of things. Like apples are associated with nice flavors. A dissociation is to break that association, right? So if we dissociate the nice flavor from the apple, people won't eat them anymore. So if we can convince people that apples don't taste good, people will stop eating apples, and then we can get them to drink soda pop. And that would be an example of mind control. How do we do that? That's what advertisers do all day. So I'm going to go with the Wikipedia definition of dissociation, just because I thought it was well written. And there we read, dissociation is any of a wide array of experiences ranging from mild emotional detachment from the immediate surroundings to a much more severe disconnection from physical and emotional experiences. The major characteristic of all dissociative phenomena involves a detachment from reality rather than a loss of reality, as in psychosis. So let's break that down. Our immediate surroundings, that means our environment. And in this context, we can say that the environment means trauma, because we don't initially dissociate from pleasant things. Now, in later, eventually, yes, we will dissociate from pleasant things. That's the point, or that's what makes dissociation pathological, is that we react, towards pleasant things as though they were unpleasant. But right now we're talking about disconnection. Okay, the disconnection from physical and emotional experiences. So that means we stop feeling. We block things out, or we deny that they exist. We engage in denial. And in other words, we stop responding. We stop responding to the environment, or specifically, and germane to our discussion, we stop responding appropriately. And so that's really the key, as I was mentioning earlier. We start out by dissociating from unpleasant things, and we end up dissociating from pleasant things. So it's kind of like a Oscar the Grouch type of thing, where yucky things are nice and nice things are yucky, kind of a reversal. And it's just a it's just a basic kind of like a Sun Tzu art of war type of thing too, that you can think about just military strategy. Okay, where you go to your enemy, and on the one hand you distract him, he goes, oh, that's the threat, and then you sock him with the other hand, right? You confuse him. You think that this is the threat, and the fist from the other direction is really where the threat is coming from the real, the real threat. So I don't want to go too fast here because this is the real meat and potatoes of the mind control process, okay? It's the stimulus and then response, and we're trying to manage that response or misdirect that response, okay? So stimulus and response is two things, right? But we're actually looking at three things because we have first the environmental stimulus, and then we have our brain's sensation or perception of that stimulus, which comes in the form of a feeling, a sensation, or emotion, we will say. And then we have the actual response of our mind, which comes in the form of a thought. And this is confusing to a lot of people by design, which is telling in itself. But so I have to really drill into this a little bit here, and I hope this makes sense to people, okay? The divide that we're talking about between stimulus and response does not occur between the environment all around us and our mind. It occurs within the mind, and specifically between the part of, between the brain and the mind, okay? So the part of our faculty, our perceptive faculties, and then our mind, which does the thinking and the reacting. So we aren't directly reacting to reality, is the point. We are reacting to our perception of reality, okay? And I mean, there's so much that's spent just on trying to confuse us with this point, but I'm trying to clarify this here. So what our senses tell us about reality is what we are reacting to. And emotions are a sense. Emotions are probably the sixth sense. So I have a little sidebar here that I want to talk about, okay? If I can, yeah. All right, so this is a model here of the way the brain works, and this is called the triune brain, okay? So we have three basically concentric parts of our brain that they say, or it's believed, were created over time. And there's problems with this, but we're going to go with it, okay? So the bottom, the most basic level of the brain is the reptile brain. This is responsible for survival, reflexes, fight or flight, and reptiles have it. And basically it's common to all reptiles and everything, which we would say is higher than a reptile, right? Which includes the next one, mammalian. The mammalian brain introduces the limbic system, which is where we get feelings, emotions from. And emotions allow us to, have more intricate ideas about our environment. And then, not ideas, but more complicated, sensations about our environment. Let us make more complicated assessments. And then finally, we've got the neocortex, which is not unique to humans, but it's most complete in human beings, and this is where we have our higher thought. Okay, so this is where the reaction takes place to the stimulus. Okay, and so the stimulus is coming up in this model through survival, and then to feels good, feels bad, and then to finally the neocortex where we're making decisions about it. And that's another. So that's from like the bottom up way of thinking about it. And another way of thinking about it is from the outside in, where we've got our environment, and then we've got our senses, and then our senses are leading to our mind, our brain and our mind, where we are making those thoughts occur. So now that we've got that triune brain model, we can say emotions are not thoughts. And that's a real important fact to think about in terms of all this kind of stuff. Okay, so emotions are basically part of our grammar. They're something we take into consideration, but they aren't basically what make us unique as individuals. And one way to think about that to realize that that's true, and I wouldn't suggest this, but if you've ever taken like a drug, like for example, if you've ever drank alcohol, a drug can make you feel a feeling. That's certainly true. Or it can make you stop feeling a feeling. Okay, so a drug can make you happy or content or amused, or it can make you relaxed and less inhibited, but it can't make you think a thought. Okay, you're not going to, smoke a drug and then just have the thought for ruler pop into your brain, because I have a ruler right here, right? That's just not how it works. So the thought comes from somewhere else, at least. Okay, it comes from a consideration of all these sensations, basically. So finally, in our definition of dissociation, we have the last sentence. The major characteristic of all dissociative phenomena involves a detachment from reality rather than a loss of reality, as in psychosis. So this serves to delimit our discussion today to not include psychosis, because this is Mind Control 101, and the psychosis is in later classes. So we are not talking about schizophrenia, which is a condition where basically the brain is cut off from the mind, from the perception, and it hallucinates a whole new reality. Okay, it denies and stops accepting reality, and then in the absence of such, it posits a new reality in the form of actual auditory and visual hallucinations. We're also not talking about multiple personality disorder, which is where the person loses contact with reality, and then they create a whole new decision-making apparatus, which is their personality. In other words, they reboot into a new operating system in response to trauma. And it's also not including catatonia, which is a complete shutdown and just turning off. But to recap then, the formula for mind control is trauma, which leads to dissociation, and then a controlled redirection or a reassociation of that person's mind to wherever you're wanting to direct them. And that sounds very much like the problem, reaction, solution kind of thing. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, or ordo out of chaos. And it should, because it is. So then last, we're just going to look at trauma, and what does that mean? Okay, so trauma is simply the Greek word for pain. Now, let's not intellectualize this. Okay, pain is pain. Pain is a universal. We're all painfully familiar with it, as it were. And there are almost infinite ways to experience pain or to inflict pain on someone else. So this is where we're going to see the commonplace nature of mind control when we realize all the different ways we have of experiencing pain, or when we see this, when we start to examine the sources of pain in our lives, whether they be someone not being very kind to you, or whether they be something on television or something you have to do like at your job or school or anything like that. Okay, so we're going to get into the examples now. This is going to be a non-exhaustive list, right? So go ahead and turn off the tape and get together with your neighbor and make a list of some of the different ways that you think that people can experience trauma. Okay? Okay. So most obvious and common way would be physical trauma, or neglect, or deprivation. So physical pain, that's pretty obvious, and there's virtually limitless ways to experience physical pain. Sleep deprivation is a big one. That can really cause you to discombobulate, which is the word I like to use as just a general term for all of this kind of stuff. Discombobulation means you're out of your mind, right? We have that phrase. And that we tend to get that way after not too many hours of missed sleep. And there I'm thinking about doctors, nurses, working 12-hour days, for 7 hours, 7 days a week, right? 7 days on, 7 hours, 7 days on, 7 days off. Maybe I'm experiencing a little bit of sleep deprivation here. Exertion is physical exercise, and that's boot camp. Okay, so merely by being exhausted, by pushed beyond your physical limits, having to run for a long time, or the wall sits is a famous one. That can really discombobulate a person and make them more suggestible, more open to other people's suggestions or inputs, right? So again, you stop a person from thinking clearly, and then you position a new solution to their problem in their way, and they say, "Oh, I'm just so desperate for any solution that I'll just grab that one, and I'll believe that's my own decision." Starvation, thirst, another obvious one. You can't go too long without eating or drinking before you start to see things. We've all seen the Far Side comic. But less obvious one here would be malnutrition. So this refers to prolonged lack of specific nutrients that the brain needs. Okay, and this was actually one of the things that led to me making this video right now. Is well, it's October, I guess, so there was a bunch of junk food brought into my work, and I ate a lot of it because I don't like my job, and my job is traumatic. And so in an effort to exercise control over my own life, I ate a bunch of chips and cookies. And then for several days, I felt really sick, and it made it hard for me to think clearly. So I wanted to get back to making videos after my little week-long ban, but I found it very difficult because my brain wasn't firing on all four cylinders. And so if you want to control a person, just feed them junk food. If you want to reduce a population's ability to think clearly, increase the proportion of empty calories and such that they're going to be, exposed to. So, and another thing that I put on the same category as nutrition would be pharmaceuticals. Okay, because I'm that kind of a guy. You're ingesting them, so they're going into your body that way. Whether or not they're a drug or just a nutrient, I don't make that much of a distinction. Obviously I don't really think we should be ingesting too many of these artificial chemicals for various reasons, but I digress. Another way that people put things into their bodies is injection, right? And that's insane. Let's flip the script on this a little bit. Whoever got the idea to inject something into their bodies, where in observing nature do you see injections, right? Why would you think that's a good idea, okay? What types of things inject? Mosquitoes, ticks, fleas, and these are our role models for how we're going to increase the health of an individual. When have you ever heard somebody say, boy, I feel so much better after that mosquito injected something into my body. Gosh, whatever that guy bit me with, boy, I'm glad for that. I think I'm going to go track him down and see what it was. Okay, it's a ridiculous concept, and it's been dominating medicine for the last 200 years, and we're now reaping the results of that decision. And I want to just think about this. So there's imagine you're injecting something into your body, right? Crazy idea, crazy hypothetical. But there's this notion that there's this injectable going around, and it's having specific effects on people's brains because it's got some specific chemicals in it, okay, or some nano devices, right? And while I would not dispute that for a second, because it is the current year, I just have to point out that um, a general uh, damage to the brain is going to cause a loss of function, okay? And the brain is an organ, okay? So when an organ gets damaged, it stops functioning as well. And the function of the brain, I'm just going to go back to the triune model of the brain, okay? The function of the neocortex, which is the most fragile part of the brain, is basically to reassure the mammalian and the reptile brains. So when we feel pain, the neocortex says it's okay, right? We rationalize that pain. We rationalize the animal brain. We reassure and soothe the animal brain. It's going to be okay. There's a reason that we're suffering this right now, but it'll be worth it in the end. Just trust me and calm down, settle down, right? And when we lose that function, we lose that ability to self-soothe, to calm down, and we just get more and more and more worked up, and that causes anxiety basically. So we see that, I'm sure you have many examples, probably in your own life, in your own, in your own mental health, you can remember or just think of examples where you felt that way. And one thing to do about it is improve your nutrition. But that's not the subject of this video. Another really powerful way to traumatize someone is through sexual trauma. And then, finally, the granddaddy of all is just fear or terror. And then to cap it all off, these examples, these kind of non-specific examples, they have found through studies that randomness applied to any of these previous methods increases the effectiveness. So another wild hypothetical. Imagine there's a disease that shows up out of nowhere, and we respond by telling everyone they have to stay in their house for a year and wear masks. And then we say, take this injection, or you'll never be allowed out. And so they do that kind of thing. They stay indoors and all that for a year. And then you let them out for a month, and you say everything's fine now. We're on the road to recovery. And then after a month passes, you say, nope, go back. Put the mask back on. That method is going to be way more effective in traumatizing people than if you were to just keep them in their homes for whatever that would be, 16 months, okay? So 12 months, let them out, put them back in for 3 months is going to be more effective than just putting them in for 16 months. And it's the same thing with like sleep, as I mentioned before. You don't just turn the lights off, keep someone in darkness because they're going to get used to it. You turn the lights on and off at random intervals where they have no control over the process. Or, there's like the drip, Chinese water torture, drip, drip, drip. If it's at an interval, eventually their brain's just going to start blocking it out. But if it's just a random thing, then their brain isn't going to get used to it ever, and it's just going to drive them insane, basically, or make them more suggestible. And a variation on this is the good cop, bad cop technique, where you have you're interrogating a subject. You have two agents. One of them is nice, and the other one is mean. And you will eventually. The theory is you will not tell anything to the mean agent, but you will eventually spill your guts to the nice agent because you become dependent on him as your only friend, basically. And a famous proponent of this method was Dr. Joseph Mengele, who, after the Holocaust, apparently his victims were still so enamored with him that they were going around calling him Joseph, the beautiful Joseph. Okay, and now specific examples. I mentioned one kind of, but you could, I'm sure, go out and just think, watch any TV show. You'll see some traumatic stuff in it, and then just think, where is this leading me? Where is any traumatic, the news is the worst, right? What am I supposed to think about this? How am I supposed to feel? And then what's my reaction supposed to be? Just think about that next time you're, anywhere, even like YouTube or Facebook, okay? But just some specific examples that came to me when I was making this video or preparing for this video, I thought were pretty interesting. So back to the triune brain again. The problem with the triune brain to a certain mindset is that it's hierarchical, right? So we look at this and it's like, are you saying mammals are better than reptiles? Are you saying humans are better than mammals, right? That really bothers a certain class of people, right? And so when you say, my brain is better than a dog's brain, there's a certain class of people who will look at you and say, is it though? Is it really? Right? How do we know that dolphins aren't going around and writing sonnets, okay? Having amazing conversations. How do we know that language is unique to humans, right? And it's like, well, I guess we kind of don't, but it's a pretty safe assumption, isn't it? They're not, I don't know. And like trees, people say, well, trees are, having all these crazy, trees are the best thing. Like, what if you go to a little kid and you say, hey, would you rather be a dog or a person? And they say, I'd rather be a person. And you ask them, why? Right? As though that were like wrong somehow. So that's just an interesting, to my view. And I was a vegetarian for 15 years. So I basically thought something along these lines, that where do we get off as humans exerting our dominance? Where do we get off as humans like coming up with triune brain models? Okay, and that's an interesting thing too, is that I learned this when I went to college. I took a neuroanatomy class, and I learned this. Okay. And now I go on Wikipedia and they say this is controversial, this has been debunked, okay. And there are problems with it. It's based on evolution, which I don't subscribe to as a theory myself. But seeds of doubt is what that's called, okay. So and what that helps, that's really attractive to younger people, particularly because traditionally, you're dependent on older people to know things about the world. You haven't had the experiences that older people have had, and so you're dependent on them to like inform your decision making. And if someone comes along and says, "Is it though? Should you listen to your pastor? Should you listen to your parents?" And it's really attractive to falsely empower a young person to say, "Oh no, I don't need to listen to those people, and I'm just going to go off and blah blah blah." And then they're what is open to them, which pathways are open to them at that point where they've been cut off from the traditional instructional methods. Okay, that's the question you need to ask. Second thing that kind of builds on this is remember, as a hierarchy, the mammalian brain, which is responsible for emotions, is subservient to the neocortex, which is responsible for rational thought. So there's no way that we can divorce ourselves from our emotions, but emotions are informing our decision-making process. They are not a part of our decision-making process. Okay, we are not letting our emotions into the driver's seat, because then we will devolve basically into animals. So think then about Spock from Star Trek, and then Data, who's basically the same character from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Okay, and I've been thinking about these guys a lot. Because you have the two different series that are based on it. The second one is obviously based on the first one, but Data is basically the same character as Spock. It's just that instead of being an alien, kind of trying to, live with humans, he's a robot trying to live with humans. But the unique, or the commonality to them is that they lack emotions, and that's what makes them different from humans. And so by contrast, what defines us as humans is our emotions, and that's what we're doing. Okay, with those characters, is we're setting up a false dialectic, which really undermines our agency as humans, and it makes us, it traps us into this false dialectic where, if we start rationalizing, we worry that we're rationalizing too much. Okay, and we've got to get back to our emotional things. And if we're a really emotional person, it empowers us, and it says, oh, this is fine. This is why I'm having all these bipolar episodes, or these manic depressive episodes, because I'm human, right? And I identify with my my dysfunction, my overly emotional self, right? And basically, it puts too much emphasis on emotion, and and again, it makes us worry, because the emotion is kind of like the child or the female. It does, it is something we need to protect. Okay, with our rational brain, which is more masculine, I would argue, in this context. So we innately have a desire to protect it, which throws the Spock Data archetype out the window, because we're protecting it, right? We're not talking down to it. We want it around. We like it for what it is. We like nice things. We like to be reassured on that level that things are going okay. And yet, we don't want to make that the decision-making apparatus for our lives or for our societies. And then just a final example. Remember when I said let's not intellectualize trauma? Well, how about we intellectualize trauma? What's that going to do? So you come in and you're outside working, and you come in and you're like, oh, my leg! I just broke my leg. Oh, my leg is in so much pain. And the person looks at you and says, that's very interesting. Let's think about that. That's going to have a terrible effect, right? And the specific effects it's going to have on you is it's going to make you feel like your pain is being trivialized. Your pain is not important, and therefore you're not important. And you're basically not going to trust that person. You're going to turn away from that person, and then if someone else comes along and says, "Hey, I'm Joseph Mengele, or I'm the good cop. Have a coffee, and I'll take you to the doctor." Then the next time they say, "Hey, vote for Joe Biden," you're silly example, silly. Ha. So anyway, I just want to make clear. I hope that's clear to everyone that trauma is very common, and the reaction to trauma is constantly being manipulated, managed for specific outcomes, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is mind control 101. So I hope you enjoyed listening to that. I hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions, please leave them below, or see me after class. And please subscribe to my channel, share this video everywhere, give it a like, and if you can support the channel in any way, I would greatly appreciate it. This has been Evan Benton for Dogg for Mayor. Thank you, and good night.